Welcome to the Loaded Goat, where we don't tolerate litter. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Chris. Hey, before we get started, have you heard the one about the goat?
There's a lot of ones about the goat, but not sure which joke you're referring to.
Let's talk about litter bugs instead.
Okay. All right. Well, so today we're doing Barney's uniform. And overall, it's kind of in the same trope where Barney gets into a pickle and he has to kind of stand up for himself. But this is not the one we always see. But this is the one where I did watch this and I thought, I pity the fool who today, in this day and age, who walks up to a cop and says, when I don't see you in that uniform, I'm going to beat you to a pulp.
Yeah, absolutely. So to your first point, new storyline. Woo-hoo! It's been a bit.
Yeah, been a bit. But, good news story. What'd you think of the episode?
Good episode. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
I did too. I think this may be the only time the Andy Griffith show, other than Barney doing his practicing, really delves into martial arts, but it works well.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So you want to dive in?
I do.
All right. This episode first aired on November 9th, 1964. We open with Andy posting a sign for the charity dance, and Barney walks up to him, and he is mad. Salt and pepper is missing, so we have a crisis.
Terrible. It folds perfectly when you dip. It hangs just right. Salt and pepper is gone.
Yeah. And so old man Goss, the dry cleaner, has lost it. And as you said, Barney says it's the perfect suit for dancing and hangs just right when he dips. And so it's a real crisis. But Andy's not worried about it, but he tells him he'll find it. But this is probably the worst time for him to see the new grocery store cleanup man, Fred, sweeping trash into the street. And he's already told him to stop 3 times. Fred is played by Alan Melvin. So I recognize him. He's up to no good. He's going to be up to no good. And probably a bully. So Barney walks up and chews him out.
Do you think that as a street sweeper he's paid as part of the New Deal? I think this is government funding that supplies the street sweeper for the grocery?
I think he works at the grocery store. He's the assistant there.
All right.
It is kind of one of those things where you are like, it is kind of just lazy to sweep trash into the street. It's
I do it with my gravel at the end of every winter. Put that in the street because the street cleaner cleans it up.
I don't think Mayberry has a street cleaner.
Yeah, that's true.
Street sweepers, I don't know when they were originally launched, but we don't see any episode where the street sweeper is running down the main street.
It was actually, I know this, it was in 1979, and it's chronicled and documented by Smashing Pumpkins in their hit song, The 1979. That's about street sweepers.
Are you pulling my leg? I know the song 1979.
Telling you the honest truth.
Well, I will. I will take you.
It paved the way for Paved Paradise, Put Up a Parking Lot, whatever song that is.
That song is much older than 1979.
Yeah, but the one when Counting Crows redid it.
I think that song may still be older than 1979.
All right.
But he's a bit stern when he writes him a ticket, and when Fred learns the fine is $4, he tells Barney he's on a power trip. Do we need to really break down the psyche of Fred, or do we think Fred's just a jerk?
Yeah. He's just a bad person, doesn't have a lot of ways to express his emotion time and time again, played by the same actor time and time again. Barney is in the right.
I agree. Fred says he's on a power trip, and he tells Barney he's going to beat him to a pulp the next time he sees him without his uniform. Barney is concerned.
I'd be scared.
I'd be scared. I don't know really what, if I was a cop and somebody said that to me, I don't know what I'd do.
No.
I'm sure that is part of police training. If somebody says something like this to you, this is how you handle it.
I think you just tase them straight to the neck.
That's what you would do?
I think that's what they train them to do.
It is a blatant threat. It's not, just because he says I'm going to do it later does not mean it's still threatening an officer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's, there are times where Barney oversteps his bound, overreaches, or makes a mistake or screws up, like we watched Man in the Middle, where everybody should be threatening to beat Barney. Everybody should be mad
at Barney, but this isn't one of them.
Everybody should be mad at Barney. This is one where you really feel for Barney.
I agree.
So later, the Taylors are leaving church on a Sunday morning, and Barney comes out of the church wearing his uniform, which the pastor notices. Barney makes a crack about having to watch the collection plate, which I mean, I didn't really feel like what he said was that offensive or anything like that. But Andy pulls him aside and tells him that it was rude, and then asks Barney why he's wearing his uniform. And Barney is evasive.
I get it. Yeah. He's got a safe face.
Yeah. He then shows up wearing his uniform on his day off, and turns out he's taken Thelma Lou to Mount Pilot. And Andy can't understand why he is wearing the uniform, and Barney makes a comment about needing to look professional when he visits their sister city.
Would that be impersonating an officer because he's not an officer of the law in Mount Pilot?
Not if you're wearing a badge of where you work or where you live. But
you're muddying the waters for sure. It's jurisdictional issues.
I don't think you're impersonating an officer until you actually try to do police work outside of your until you try to do police work.
All right, you yell things like "No more dead cops."
I think if you start trying to pull people over or you start, throwing your weight around, then yes, that's impersonating the police officer. And I don't know what the rule is. I would imagine most of the time the law enforcement officer, where in another jurisdiction, just says, "Get out of my jurisdiction."
Yeah, I can see that.
But out comes Fred, and he is giving Barney a 1,000-yard stare. And Andy says that he hasn't paid his ticket yet. And they go inside, and Mr. Goss calls, and they found salt and pepper. But
thank goodness.
You'd expect Barney to be happy, but he's not. And he says that he's not going to wear the suit to the dance. He'll probably wear his uniform. And he also says the suit is not going to fit him because he's been gaining weight. And he says that he's going to, and so, yeah, it's the whole thing. I mean, if you're Andy, you're just perplexed. And in comes Fred to pay his ticket. And Barney leaves, and Fred tells Andy that he's going to get his $4 worth and then some. And
squeeze it right out of him. I saw that like twist him like a wet rag.
Yeah. And he leaves, and Andy is perplexed and concerned as we go to commercial.
Really makes you think.
What does it make you think?
About the foundation of violence in small town America.
I feel like you're just throwing out a bunch of platitudes.
Thank you.
You need to step up.
All right.
So this episode was produced by Pod Machine. They do great podcasts at a great rate. Go to podmachine.com to learn more and enter Loaded Goat at checkout for a 10% discount. After the break, Barney comes in and he sees salt and pepper hanging on a shelf in the jail. And Andy had picked it up for him, and it turns out the dance is that night. And Barney's kind of upset. He doesn't really know what to say. And then Andy clears his throat and asks how he and Fred are getting along. And he notes that he's a big guy. And then he asks Barney if he's after him. And Barney tells him what happened.
Are you surprised that Thelma Lou's not drawn into this at any point about Barney consulting with her? Because I feel like she'd be a good person to kind of help boost his ego and help him think through. She is a voice that I think is missing from this episode.
It would be helpful if Barney and if Thelma Lou and Helen were in this episode. I don't know why they weren't in this episode, but I have to imagine it also, this guy's kind of Fred's a real bully. And this is almost like Barney dealing with him man to man. And if Thelma Lou gets involved, or worse yet, Fred makes a comment to Thelma Lou, that really kind of takes away from the episode.
Yeah, I can see that.
This is one where Andy is kind of like, we'll take this guy out at the knees. I will throw the book at him. I think he is not, if Andy had his druthers, Fred would be sitting in a jail cell right now.
I think so too. I mean, he's threatened the officer, and he's threatened the officer also to the sheriff.
Yeah.
It's time for a little bit of booking.
Yeah. And, but Andy says he can throw the book at him, and Barney says he wants to handle it himself. And then,
which means Andy will have to do it. Da, da, da.
Well, he will. But Barney also says he's been taking judo classes and that he's now dangerous without his uniform.
We've had this before, right?
Well, there's a couple of things. One,
he reads the handbook.
He did read the handbook. We've also watched they did that scene in the epilogue. We also broke that down. They did it on a CBS special where they recreated the scene.
Okay. I thought that we'd already seen this. I thought for sure. Okay. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
And so he's been taking judo. He's now a dangerous weapon without his uniform. And he says, "This is the body of a judo fighter. I'm a deadly weapon," which
I
is
get that.
all right. Have you ever seen Con Air?
I have not. I've seen Snakes on a Plane, though.
Okay, one is a little different from the other. So, Con Air, are you familiar with the movie Con Air?
I am.
So, it is like 90s action movie, kind of really over the top ridiculous. But basically, Nicolas Cage comes home after serving his country in war. I think he's supposed to have been in Desert Storm. I think he's an Army Ranger or a Green Beret. And he and his wife go out to celebrate him being home. And he gets accosted in a bar. These guys come out and accost them. And he kills them, or kills at least one of them in a fight. And because he killed these redneck punks in Alabama for basically assaulting him and his wife, he ends up going to jail for like 7 years in federal prison. It's really stupid. But my point is,
it's a setup to an airplane movie.
It's a setup to a great airplane movie, or a silly airplane movie. And then he gets on a plane and he's being released, but he gets on a plane with the worst criminals in the country. You got John Malkovich as like this mastermind. You got Ving Rhames. You got Steve Buscemi, who's supposed to be like a Hannibal Lecter type person. You got Danny Trejo as a serial rapist. I mean, it is like
I didn't know it had this many big names.
I mean, Dave Chappelle's in it. Yeah, there's a ton of people in it. But anyway, now I'm just kind of like, imagine Con Air with Barney Fife. Because he's a deadly weapon. I can see that. And Barney has a lot of good lines with this. With what I know about judo, I'm a walking bomb just waiting to go off. And
did you ever hear this rumor growing up that like professional boxers can't ever get in street fights because their fists are deadly weapons?
I mean,
I think this is where that started.
I mean, I think there's two sides of that. I would say there's a lot of professional wrestlers and a lot of boxers who could probably not handle themselves at all in street fights. And then there are some that would probably just, if they get a hold of you, they will really mess you up. I think it's kind of like with boxing and professional wrestling. There are some boxers and some professional wrestlers who wouldn't know the first thing about handling themselves in a street fight or a bar fight. And I think
elbows work.
And then there are some that would really mess you up. But that being said, I don't think anybody in their right mind would want to take a fist from George Foreman or Muhammad Ali to the face, even with a bare-knuckled fist to the face from either one of those guys, even now, much less when they were in their prime. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
Not interested.
No. So Barney leaves and he does some judo moves as he goes out the door. Looks pretty intimidating. And we cut to Andy going to Barney's judo instructor in Mount Pilot. And in case you didn't figure out that he was going to his judo instructor, they play some Asian-themed music.
They really lean into all the old Hollywood stereotypes in this scene.
Yeah. As he goes in and he greets Barney's instructor, Mr. Azumoto, who's played by Yuki Shimoda, who was born in Sacramento, but he's playing...
his accent didn't feel real. It felt over the top and heavy notes of old-time racism.
As well as his broken English and other things that they threw in. I mean, Yuki Shimoda was actually interred during World War II. So that was, I mean, he was born here and I mean, he's had the experiences, he had that experience and, but he was a character actor and he was on a lot of shows like the Andy Griffith Show. But even with the ridiculous, even with the old school, even though this scene is not aged well, I think he's very compelling as Mr. Azumoto.
Yeah, you can tell that he cares about Chicken Bone Barney.
He does. Andy asks him about Barney, and he says Barney is a good man, a very good man who tries very hard. Andy then asks if Barney got into a fight with a man weighing 200 pounds, and he's like, "What do you have a chance?" And he asks Andy if he's Barney's friend, and Andy says yes. He goes, "Well, then he needs to stop the fight because Barney will get killed." And they call him the Chicken, not because he's afraid, but because he has weak bones.
Little bones that snap.
Little bones that snap. Which I can see that. And Andy thanks him, and Mr. Azumoto again tells him to stop the fight because he likes Barney a lot. Andy starts to leave, and then he gets an idea, and he asks him what size suit Mr. Azumoto wears. And then Andy approaches Fred and asks him to let the issue with Barney go. And Fred says he won't. And Andy warns him that Barney is trained in judo, which Fred doesn't care. He's kind of laughs at the notion. And then Andy just lets him know that he'll be coming by the courthouse to get his suit around 7:45.
Old salt and pepper. If you hear a sneeze, must be close to the suit.
Yeah. Not only is Fred a bully and not a nice guy, he's really stupid too.
Well, they all are. That's how they become bullies.
Because he's insecure about being stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some smart bullies too, but not Fred. Fred's not one of them. Fred goes, oh, I'll just keep sweeping this in the street. I don't, and then he gets mad because he gets a ticket. So later that night, Fred shows up, and out comes Andy and Mr. Isamoto disguised as Barney and Salt and Pepper. And he walks towards the alley where Fred is hiding, and Fred attacks him. And Mr. Isamoto lays down a good old-fashioned Mayberry melee. I mean, it is.
he throws him on the ground. He kicks.
This guy's flying through the air. Yeah, do you
real back alley stuff?
Yeah, I mean, judo obviously that's all about. I mean, it's all about like countering. Do you think basically Fred just got slammed around on the ground? You think he just hit the ground over and over and over as he kept trying to throw shots?
I do.
Yeah, I think so too. How long do you think this fight lasted?
No more than an hour and a half.
I mean, no more than an hour and a half. So somewhere between 15 seconds and an hour and a half. That's what you're guessing? Okay. Yeah. All right. Thanks for speculating with me. I appreciate it. I'm going to guess it lasted a good total of 3 minutes. And
I think 3 minutes is appropriate.
Fred was done. So Andy shows up with the salt and pepper suit, and he basically tells Barney he's kind of had enough. He's got to face Fred Plummer, because he is a symbol of the law and they can't give up that respect. But he also just reminds them we're lawmen no matter what we're wearing. And Barney agrees.
An important lesson that maybe could have been delivered earlier in the show.
Without the judo?
Yeah.
That's the lesson to deal with Fred Plummer. I mean, like, you beat up my deputy. You're going to the state prison where guys are bigger than you and meaner than you.
Yeah, correct.
So they pull up to the courthouse and they see the light on at the grocery store, and Andy sends Barney over to speak with Fred. Barney finds Fred in the alley with his face in his hands, and he is scared, and Barney gives him a very kind of milquetoast. He's quivering, yeah. And Barney gives him a very shaky speech about respect. And Fred says he understands and that judo is something awful and that he believes that Barney's dangerous. And Barney gets a moment of confidence and just kind of says, okay. And it kind of just rips into him and starts the lecture about trash in the street. The manhunt starts, music starts playing, and Barney gets in the car and basically gives a whole speech and then says, let's go, Ange, the girls are waiting. And Andy says, right, Tiger, and we go to commercial.
That's cute. Barney got to have his head held high.
Yeah, he
held high.
He did. And, we're happy for him. And Barney gives Andy a ruler. Oh, I'm sorry. In the epilogue, Barney is practicing his judo in the courthouse when Andy comes in. He's clearly not good at the judo, but Andy tells him he should give it up because basically it does not make him dangerous. He's just at some point going to get hurt. Yeah. And Barney gives Andy a ruler and tells him to make a run at him. He starts. Barney goes, wait a minute. He needs to read his book. And the next time Andy subdues him, basically just kind of almost, has him.
Takes him to the ground. He needs to be wearing salt and pepper so he can dip and let the folds fall.
Yeah. And if this looks familiar, as we mentioned earlier, we saw it on the Andy Griffith, Don Knotts, and Jim Neighbors show special, but it was in color. And then Barney gets him to do it in slow motion, and he shows how he can catch his arm and get leverage. And the problem is he can't get leverage. He can maybe catch his arm, but that's all he can do. So the next time Barney catches Andy, but Andy just kind of overpowers him and just forces him to the ground. And
he's lucky his chicken bone wing didn't snap.
He's lucky. I'm just wondering, how they know Barney's got weak bones in judo. Is he broken something?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. So how many whistles would you give this?
I'd give it 9. I thought this was a fun episode. New storyline, a lot of good Barney, good physical humor. We get a back alley brawl. That's rare for this episode, for this show.
That's fair. What
about you?
I'll give it 8.
8. All right. I'm ahead.
Yeah. So do you have any final thoughts?
I want to just emphasize that violence is not the answer, but if you do have anger issues, doing some martial arts might be a way to channel some of that energy into a productive way. So if you feel the well of heat and anger in your heart, please go down to your local artist shop,
martial arts
studio.
Okay.
Yeah. What about you?
Are you suggesting this to me or our listeners?
No, our listeners.
Yeah.
Like Chris Hollinghead,
Randy Turner.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, have you ever done martial arts?
No. Have you?
I don't think so. I don't even think I've ever taken one karate. Actually, I took karate classes in college. I'm not a lethal weapon.
Okay. Yeah. Neither am I.
So yeah. All right. Well, I don't have any final thoughts. I think this was fun. It's good to see you as always. What are you doing with your facial hair? You look like you're growing a beard, but you're wanting the mustache to really stand out.
The mustache forward beard. It's a classic.
So what exactly is that?
It's the mustache forward beard is all it is. It's just a little bit more stash to the stubble ratio.
I see. Is this a classic facial hair, or is this something you're doing?
Oh, this is a classic. This is total classic. But it's definitely something I'm doing. I've got a thin mustache though, so it doesn't hold up great.
It looks like it could be a really full mustache.
Yeah, it's looking pretty good right here. It's a little thinny. It doesn't have the depth from nose to lip that I think yours might be coming through as.
I don't have a stash. I should actually get one and grow one. That may be something we could do when we're recording in November. We can do mustaches for November.
We can do that. It's like a vacation from ourselves.
That is probably when that episode of Seinfeld, and they kick off season 9, and they're sitting in the coffee, and they're sitting in the diner with those mustaches. So that is so funny.
It's great.
Yeah, a vacation from ourselves. That is something we can try to do. But in the meantime, thanks for listening. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you think about it, subscribe. Next week, we'll do Opie's Fortune. Until then, Christopher, we can maybe take a vacation from ourselves. We're podcasters no matter what we're wearing.
Oh.